All right. Hello and welcome to the Sexient Being Sessions. I am Alix Pruett, a certified sex, love, and relationship coach and reality guide. I work with men, women, and couples plus who want to transform their old patterns, pains, and beliefs so they can create thriving relationships that are deeply connected, playful, and fulfilling within themselves and with others. Today, I'm joined by the magnificent Rachel Rose. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. I am Rachel Rose. I am a life coach with a master's in psychology, and I help women find love after trauma. And I help women with PTSD help find passion in their lives again so they can recreate and grow out of the new person they have become with happiness and peace.
And as I mentioned last time, such a beautiful offering. Thank you for sharing that with the world.
You.
All right, our topic today is bloom, finding love after toxic relationships. And I'm going to let you take a bit of the lead on this one because it was a topic of your choice, my dear.
Yeah, this topic I think I could, talk forever on because there's so many different directions on what happens for every individual person when they are, finally ready to find a new person
Hmm.
to coexist life with after a toxic or abusive relationships. One of the first things that I discovered for myself was running away from green flags.
Yes.
When you are someone who has gone through a traumatic, toxic, or abusive relationship, or just trauma in general, it doesn't have to be from a relationship, or at least not a romantic one. It could be from childhood, a teacher, a parent, a friend, the list goes on forever. What was happening for me was I was able to spot the red flags like no one's business. And that was not I would stop, be like, okay, I see a red flag. That's not happening for me. And I was not prepared for how I would react to green flags. And a green flag to someone with trauma could present itself as a red flag. Be like, oh, this person is cooking me dinner every night, and they're buying me flowers, they're being so loving. What's the catch?
Yeah.
When is that red flag coming? And because we're so hyper focused on the reality that this can't be genuine, that this can't be serious, a lot of times we create a red flag within ourselves that we project onto the situation or the person.
Yeah, in my personal experience and my current relationship, and I am so appreciative of my partner
Mhm.
because I brought it up even probably in the first month of us dating. There was constantly the feeling of when is the other shoe going to drop?
Mhm.
Like this feels too good to be true. The other shoe has to drop. Like it's not possible
Mhm.
for somebody to just love you without trying to manipulate you, right? They're
Mhm.
trying to hide something. In even though he was being very open and transparent about so many things, like there was constantly this like thing in me looking
Mhm.
for any little fault that
Mhm.
could be signaling this is going to go away.
Mhm. Yeah. And for me, I found myself testing the waters in my opinion and myself in unhealthy ways for the flowering relationship that was happening, and for my own personal healing. It was like a victim mentality for me, and I had to I would be like, well, this happened to me in the past, so like this is why I am this way now.
Mm.
instead of just enjoying the moments, I had to create a reason why it shouldn't be that good in that moment.
Yeah.
Like, especially in things that I'm going to use a grotesque terminology here. Don't take it too strict. Things that I was not allowed to do in past relationships that I am now allowed to do in my current one. And I don't mean allowed as in like, like people allow you to do certain things. This is what I was allowing for myself.
Mhm.
And I would test the waters with what I was allowed to do or was not allowed to do in the past, and I'd bring it into the now. And my approach was honestly a bit toxic in the beginning, and I was aware of that, so that was very helpful for me. And I just noticed, in the first 4 months, it was anxiety ridden, and I was freaking out over the tiniest things, as if I didn't something right now, this person would leave me and I would be alone for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I had to, I had a lot of support in that. And, someone said to me, like, have fun just dating.
Mhm.
This is the beginning of a relationship. And, like when you plant a flower with from a seed, it takes time for it to finally reach the surface soil and you can actually see its growth. And the same thing happens in the beginning of relationships. It's difficult to combat that anxiety, especially when you have PTSD or trauma bonded um, traumas from your past, to not be able to physically see where this is going. Is it going to fruit? Am I going to make it to the surface with this person? And that darkness can be suffocating, and it caused a lot of anxiety for me that I I challenged. And I think that everyone should approach it in a way that's healthy for them, for sure. And it was okay for me because I was seeing a coach, and I have mentors, and I have a lot of support in my family now, um, that I put into place to help me grow. But it is very nerve wracking in the beginning when you can't see what potentials are going to happen. And so I catastrophized. Oh, well, if I can't see anything, that means there's nothing there. That means that, he's never going to love me, or it's never going to be what I imagined. And it brought me to living within a fantasy that didn't exist. And it caused a lot more problems in, this budding relationship than really should have been there in my case.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of that idea of like us living in the past, right? Or us living in the
Mhm.
future. So being past being more of the depressive state,
Mhm.
future being the high anxiety
Mhm.
of like
Yeah.
you're creating your own struggle when you're not just present.
Mhm.
Being in that presence isn't easy, right? Like our minds tend to wander in those
Mhm.
spaces. But that's the more to me you can work on removing expectations,
Mhm.
right? This can even be like not only expectations of like this person is going to be the person I form a relationship with, especially in the early stages of dating, um, but expectations that what happened in the past is now going to happen in the future,
Mhm.
right? Um, but when you remove those expectations, it makes it a lot easier to be with that present moment, to
Yeah.
go on a date, to just enjoy the experience of getting to know somebody new,
Mhm.
getting curious about being able to ask them questions, right? going and like being able to see the breathtaking view
Yeah.
offered at the sunset of whatever that may be for the people on that date. But when you're going into it without any expectations, to me, it's also that space. Like, if your date is a complete, like, stick in the mud and they're not enjoying themselves, you can still enjoy yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
They could be with all their shit. That doesn't have to change your state and your core, but coming to a very solid place within your own core being
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
helpful. And
Yeah.
that's any of the dating and relationship books I've read over that aren't just based on like, oh, let me give people a script, right? Because those definitely exist in the world. Um, a lot of those, it's the core foundation is coming back to self love.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's there are many ways we show up for ourselves in self love. Actually, I don't think you're in TikTok, so I did not ask you this question.
Mhm. Probably not.
What is your favorite or your top daily practice of self-love?
My skincare.
Skincare, beautiful.
Mhm. I actually make it into a ritualistic process for me. I make my own body oils and body like essence sprays from herbs that I've collected myself when I go camping, and just figured out what works best with my skin. And that
Mhm.
was a really fun process for me. A lot of trial and error. Called it my skin journey. Um, because I'm not that old yet. I'm only about 32, and I say about because my birthday is like in a month. But I had fun with that instead of being like, "Oh my god, I'm getting old. I'm seeing wrinkles where I didn't have them before." I was like, "Well, I guess I got to change it up because this is my growing body." And I had fun with that, and I was just and I love being I call it my witchy behavior when I'm camping. I love going and scavenging for different herbs and hanging them up and drying them, and like the whole process, I made it into something that's more than just uh, mundane daily routine. Because I created all of that myself, when I put it on my face, I know that I put hard work into this. I know the ingredients that I put in and what they're serving for me. And I like the smells that I chose and this and that. So,
Mhm.
self care is not just about making sure you do it every day, it's also having fun with the process and having creativity in that fun to find what brings you joy in that moment. So now it's not a task.
Yeah, it's something
It's
you
living.
find pleasurable. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and in that, like, I definitely want to commend your dedication to your self-care, your skincare, this deep devotion of your skin because it is the biggest organ we have on our body.
Yeah.
And it is
Yes.
a beautiful one to show all that love to. And I have my own
Mhm.
skincare regimens as well that I thoroughly enjoy and have allowed myself the space to enjoy.
Mhm.
Mine my daily self-care practice now is more of an internal one, and it comes back to boundaries. And for me, it is
Mhm.
being able to stick with speaking my authentic yes and no.
Yes.
Even if it means that I have to be like, well, I don't know. Like, I'll have to get you an answer later. Right.
Mhm.
But being willing to give myself that time, and especially if I feel unsure,
Mhm.
to say my yes or to say my no, and sticking with that. Because for a very long time, I wouldn't. I had very weak boundaries.
Mhm.
And the thing I ended up discovering so highly through this self journey, because so much of it comes back to our own boundaries, um, was really that that premise that like I don't ever have to tell anyone else my boundaries. Like if I say no, I don't then have to give an explanation. No is a complete sentence
Mhm.
on its own. Same with my yes. I don't have to explain why it's a yes for me. It is. You can
Mhm.
enjoy that or not. But in that, the more I respect my own boundaries, the more I am showing myself love.
Mhm.
And if my boundaries decide to like flex and it's like, oh, well, this was a no before, but there's a little bit more of a yes feeling in here as well, I get to explore that. And it's okay that my answer changed.
Mhm.
But sticking with that for myself, not, oh, I'm going to say yes because I want to avoid a conflict. I don't want to fight with this person,
Mhm.
right? Even though it puts me beyond my own capabilities.
Mhm. And also, I want to touch on no being a full sentence.
Mhm.
Communication, especially with a new partner or anybody, when you're finding yourself in need of saying no, a lot of time, especially with people with trauma or PTSD in the past, feel the need to explain why they're saying no. And
Mhm.
something that I've been practicing for myself is, and usually I practice this when I'm not in an active moment of saying no, but I remember, in the past when I did or did not say no, it doesn't really matter, why I felt the need to justify myself. Why wasn't no enough? And a lot of the time we say no and then go into a tangent of sorts as to why we're saying no. And it's usually just from, other people not accepting that no in the past, which is actually a trauma response. So paying attention to whether, what's happening inside of you when you just say no. Do you feel finished, or do you feel like you need to explain to yourself to them? Thinking about why you need to. Do you need to? And if you really feel like you do, and I suggest this 'cause it's something that I practice. Just leave it at no with them. Go to the bathroom, look at the mirror, and explain to yourself those justifications, why that no was necessary. And then ask yourself, did I really need to say all of that to them? Or was I just saying that for me?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the other really valuable thing I keep noticing coming up is I didn't actually know how to recognize my yes and no in my
Mm,
body, right? It
mhm.
it just became more of an automatic response after a lot of bad relationships
Yeah.
and traumatizing myself that like, oh, if I say no, then I'm going to get a whole bunch of questions of why and needing to explain and all these things. And like, I didn't want to be experiencing that either.
Mhm.
Um, but I actually conditioned myself to not feel my no. And there's some really powerful practices that I learned through my tantric based training. And it's allowing yourself the time and the space to drop into your body.
Mhm.
And so you can sit or lay down and you're just going to take some deep breaths down into your low belly. You're wanting to make sure you're bringing that breath all the way down, almost like you could like bring it down to the base of your pelvic floor.
Mhm.
And even though logically your lungs don't go that far, that's okay. Imagine the breath going there.
Yes.
But once you've taken a few breaths, you've allowed yourself to drop in, you're just very slowly going to open your body. So if you're laying down,
Mhm.
then you would butterfly your knees
Mm.
out and open to the side.
Mm-hmm.
And as you do that, you say yes.
Mm.
And then on the next breath, you bring your knees back together. And as you bring your knees back together, you say no. And you
Mm-hmm.
just notice what the sensations are in your body as you're going through this. I do want to specify that there are times where this butterfly movement, with the legs specifically, can bring up trauma for people,
Yeah.
especially if they have experienced sexual abuse. So if
Yeah.
that feels too dysregulating for your system because I am not there to personally guide you,
Mm-hmm.
then you can also do this with your arms.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep your arms in
Yeah.
crossed over your chest. And as you do the first breath, you slowly open your arms, saying yes. On the next breath, you slowly bring your arms in and say no.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the idea of being able to use your body and the sensations you are feeling, getting in connection with those to
Mm-hmm.
help guide you in what your answer is. But you
Yeah.
want to practice this and do this before you're actually in a situation where you're giving someone an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you notice it's really hard to be with your yes and no, even in conversation, like see if you have a friend who will role play with you and just ask them to ask you questions.
Yes.
And you can then take what you learned in the first step of your own yes and no practice and see if you notice those sensations without you doing the body movements,
Mm-hmm.
right? Another, I love giving practices because then people can actually take and apply things versus just tons of information dropped in the brain.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Another really fun practice, and it can feel really difficult, um, is what I call the no practice. And I believe it either comes from the book Existential Kink or the book Unbound. It's not clear on my brain right now. So I will just reference both of them. But it's the no practice. And pretty much this involves you having another person there. You sit down, one person is the questioner, the other person gives the answers. The person who asks the question is asking the answerer
Mm-hmm.
questions for them to do something for them, to give them something.
Mm-hmm.
And the only rule for the person who is saying or giving the answers, every single answer has to be a no.
Yes.
And at some point, you swap roles and do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
One, it can help kind of decondition us because we don't like receiving no's in
Yeah.
general, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it can also help open us up to being able to say no and not have it feel like such a struggle,
Yes.
right? And I recommend whoever is asking the questions, ask a mix of questions for things you want and things you don't actually want, because then you can also see how asking those questions feels different in
Mm-hmm.
your body
Mm.
and where you may be putting more pressure on yourself when you're asking a question for something you want and the things you're kind of attaching to that person needing to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
I also found an interesting layer to it when I was the questioner, and this was kind of my like sadistic side coming in a bit, where I would specifically ask the person I was playing the game with for things that I knew they wanted. And then they
Ah.
had to say no to it. And it it fed my inner sadist and it was a lot of fun. Um
Yeah.
but and you can also play with the tone in which you're asking. Like you don't have to stay like stagnant of like, Rachel, will you give me $1 million? Right? It can be like,
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, can you give me $1 million? Right? Like you change up the emphasis, change up the tone in what you're asking the questions and giving the nose in.
Yeah.
Because when you say no from a very serious place, it feels different in your body
Mhm.
than when you're like, ah, no thanks,
Mhm.
right? And
It also can invite different responses from the people you are saying no to. Like if it's a serious situation, you have to have a hard no, very distinct no. That
mhm,
says like that's a like hard pass to that person, and it could be perceived as aggressive or combative or something. And if the situation you're in, it could be with your kids or your family members, and you don't want to be perceived as being aggressive, using those tones to be like, no, I love you, but no, or something
yeah,
like that. The same tonalities for when you're asking the questions and saying your no's within yourself and others.
yeah. And there's lots of work that can be done around no's in particular. These are just some fun ways for you to start exploring it. And they're
Yes.
little practices, but they can also feel really big and overwhelming at times. It just depends on where
Mhm.
you're at. But
Oh,
my
yeah.
recommendation is to approach it with curiosity, right?
Yes.
You're
Fun.
noticing, you're not judging,
Mhm.
right? You're just noticing what comes up, what's happening in that moment, and play with it.
Mhm. Yeah, I had a mentor, made he one of the tasks that he had me do was I spent 24 hours where I had to say no to everyone. Obviously, I had to make sure that, that worked with work or certain situations, and I had to
Mhm.
communicate with the people in that 24 hours what I was doing, just to not confuse people. Be like, hey, can you get this? I was working as a preschool teacher. Can you go take care of these kids, take them to the bathroom or something like that? I can't be like, no. You still do your job. But that was a very difficult 24 hours for me. And I
Yeah.
realized how difficult it is for me to say no. And that brought a lot of contemplation. Why? Why is that difficult for me? And so, kind of throwing it back into, finding love after a toxic relationship, one of my big no's was feeling the need for that person to quote unquote complete me. And that is, yeah, I don't know if anyone's seen Jerry Maguire, but, famous line is, you complete me.
Mhm.
And growing up, I was like, oh, that's love. That, when you complete each other. Um, And as an adult, something my dad always says is like, no, that's gross. And it clicked in my adulthood as to why that's gross, as my dad would say. That complete me aspect onto another person.
Mhm.
And so that is a big no for me. If I feel like that this person that I am currently with in this new budding relationship, and I'll give you an example. So my current relationship, before I started seeing this person, I was perfectly fine with being alone. I had finally found my solidarity. I'm sorry, my words, um, my solitude. I wasn't lonely. I was content with who I was. I loved who I was becoming. I was getting back into shape. I was educating myself, getting my master's degree. I was perfectly fine. And I stumbled upon this person after going to some clubs that I was trying to get out into the world again. And I stumbled upon this person. And I noticed after a couple of months that feeling of solitude was leaving me. And I was now, when not with him, I was feeling incomplete. Like I was anxious, I was irritable, and I was scared. this person would abandon me like all the rest. And I would then again be alone and lonely. And that was a communication of no's that I had to have with myself.
Mhm.
No, Rachel, you cannot do that because you don't want that. That's not what you desire. And so, after a toxic relationship and entering into one that is a budding, let's say, healthy one, recognizing that about yourself, at least for me, was huge. And that it's not just saying no to others, it's also recognizing what boundaries you have for yourself and saying no to yourself. And I think that has probably been harder for me than saying no to anyone else.
Well, and the thing that stood out to me there was the piece you said about abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this is to me where it links back to boundaries and specifically this topic of your no.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, when I would get into more of these toxic spaces of partnered relationships, I would start losing my no, right? I would abandon my own no. Like
Yeah.
that was my responsibility. It is not my partner's responsibility or the grocer's responsibility or anybody else's responsibility to honor my no
Mm-hmm.
or to try to mind read that or anything else. I'm the only one who knows that. Right?
Yeah.
But the more I abandoned my no, the more I abandoned myself. So then when this relationship, it was very toxic, would eventually come to its like eruption point, the big chaos moment at the end that finally led to this is definitely a no, it doesn't work anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether that was me or the other person ending it. Then I was so terrified of that person leaving because it was me getting abandoned. But ultimately, the biggest person who had abandoned me in my relationship was me.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's where when it comes down to like you being in toxic relationships, especially when you feel like you're losing yourself or you're really scared of the other person abandoning you,
Mm-hmm.
like taking a deeper look at where did I abandon myself? If
Yes.
you're worried about the other person having lied, which I'm not saying that they did not lie, right? You may
Mm-hmm.
have I've caught ex-partners smack dab in the middle of lies with hard evidence and still had them try telling me that they weren't lying, even though they were telling me they did not sleep with this person. And there's photo evidence,
Yeah.
dated, time stamped on their phone right in front of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ultimately, it came down to I had gotten intuitive hits. I had gotten things coming up in my system saying, no, something's not right. Like I remember the first instance where my ex-husband had like made a comment and the entire time we were together, I was never worried about him cheating. And based off of one little comment he had made, I was like, there was a weird like thought bubble in my head and it was like, is he having an affair? Right? Is that what he's going to tell me right now? And he didn't tell me that. Then over the next week and a half, he proceeded to have an affair. And I ended up finding out months later that the month prior, he had not been having a physically intimate affair, but had been talking about it with another person,
Yeah.
right? But I didn't listen to my own intuition on that, right? And it didn't matter. Like, I asked him, like, I was asking him point blank, and he would lie straight to my face. The
Mm-hmm.
thing was, I was lying to myself when it really came down to it.
Yeah.
There had been so much I'd been lying to myself about.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really where it comes down to that inner work of like, I had my trauma coach tell me this at one point where I was like, well, I'm in this new relationship and I really just want to be able to like trust my partner. We'd only been dating a few months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and she's like, well, Alix, you may never be able to 100% just trust somebody. And maybe you're not supposed to ever give anybody else
Mm-mm.
that amount of trust. But the thing you can trust or build 100% trust in is yourself. That
Yes.
you're going to show up for you, that you are going to be there with you. And I feel like I've said this in our calls before, but you are the only person there with you from the moment you are born
To the
to
moment
the
you,
moment you die
yeah,
for every single experience.
for all of it. You're the one who's always gotten up to yourself, for yourself, this entire time.
Hmm. And I've seen it displayed through my own experience that the more loving I am with myself, the
Mm-hmm.
easier it is for genuine love to come in from the relationships outside of me.
Mm-hmm.
There ends up being an openness and also a trust in knowing within myself that if this person goes away, I'm going to be okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've had hundreds, thousands of people come into my life, not dating partners particularly, right?
Yeah.
But just over the course of my almost 39 years on this planet, I have had hundreds and thousands of people pass
Mm-hmm.
through my life.
Yeah.
And I was okay. I kept going.
Yes.
And there will probably be hundreds and thousands more people, right?
Mm. Yeah. And I loved what you said about what your mentor said to you about trust and how maybe you're not supposed to fully trust anyone.
Hmm.
We are only able to control ourselves.
Yes.
That is just reality. That's fact. I have no ability to even control my mother. She is her own autonomous person. And so, not to make it sound negative, because it's not actually a negative thing to realize that you can't ever actually 100% fully trust someone, but you can 99.9. And that is allowing the reality that there are some things about other people, most things, that you can't control. And so, yeah, they could say they would take a bullet for you, and they could be, lunging at that bullet and still be 3 seconds too late, and they didn't make it in time or something like that. There's just unpredictabilities like that, but you can 100% fully trust yourself.
Hmm.
And I firmly I'll die on this hill, believe that is more difficult than even 99.9% trusting any other human. It is far easier for me to 99.9% trust my mother or trust my father or even my ex-husband than it was for me to 100% trust myself.
Hmm.
And that trust builds into those boundaries. And a lot of these no's that we have difficulty saying with ourselves come from our past shames in distrusting ourselves, not trusting our intuition, not saying no when we knew we should, but we didn't want that abandonment from that person. And then when entering into a new relationship, let's say let's go with 5 years, and you've had 5 years of healing, you've developed new hobbies, you've gotten into the best shape of your life, like you're eating certain things that you've got this whole routine. and this whole unique person that you have worked 5 years to build. And then all of a sudden, 2 months into this new relationship, you start to feel like you're losing that person that you created for yourself because you're scared of that person disappearing. And you're putting more trust into building that 99.9 than maintaining your 100%. And I'm not saying to stop trying to build that trust with this person, but pay attention to what your levels are in yourself. And when you're building a new relationship with someone, a lot of the time it's figuring out if you're going to like who you're going to become when being with this person.
Well,
And
and if
yeah.
you already feel like, yeah, if you feel like you can't be yourself and be accepted, understood,
Hmm.
and loved, especially when this is somebody like if you want them as a life partner or a longer term
Hmm.
like dating partner,
Hmm.
things like that. If it's not somebody you feel like you can be yourself with, then it's probably not the right relationship for you.
Hmm.
And like it can be really easy to get stuck on the idea of like, oh, like this is the only person for me. I won't be able to find anybody else. There's 7.8 billion people in the world.
Hmm.
There is somebody out there who will love your flavor,
Hmm.
right? Who will love everything about you and see you as a fucking god or goddess in your own right.
Hmm.
But if you can't see yourself and your own like divine
Godhood. Yeah.
uniqueness,
Yeah.
then nobody else is really going to be able to tap into that. Or if they're able to, you're not going to believe them anyway.
Yeah. I
Right?
also,
That's the rejection of the green flags.
yes. I also want to emphasize that I love that I'm saying this right after you said the rejection of the green flags. When you're someone who's got PTSD, you suffered a toxic relationship, you've got shit in your past that has left a lot of weight that is you've worked hard to take off of your chest, but you still remember that feeling. It is easy to slip into old habits. Even after, let's say, 30 years of independent healing that you've done for yourself, and now you're finally dating again, it doesn't matter. Those 30 years it could have been like 3 seconds, and you fall back into this habit of what you did in the past to help your security, to make sure you didn't feel abandoned. And it could very well be sticking to your guns and saying your no's to yourself and not abandoning the person that you created in this new relationship. And it could very well work. It could, you know, many times with trauma, we create a lot of our own issues. Unfortunately, it sucks, but it is a uncomfortable reality. Um, yes, if a person makes you feel uncomfortable like that, evaluate whether or not it's actually them who's making you feel uncomfortable, or if it's you abandoning yourself that's catastrophizing a situation, and you're reacting to these green flags in a way to victimize and convince yourself that you don't deserve it. Um, Either one are possible. So it's really good to vet yourself to make sure which one is happening. Because it could very well be, like you need to move on. This person's just not creating the person you want to be with this person. But it could also be your fear is manifesting itself in a way that is putting up a barrier between this budding relationship. Hope I conveyed that well.
Yeah, no, and we end up creating a lot of our own blocks to
Mm-hmm.
being able to receive what we want. And that's even that yes no game that I mentioned earlier, where that can be so powerful because you're getting to ask for things again that you want and you don't want. We can be really bad at asking for what we want or expressing what our desires are. And so even just in that piece, like getting okay with asking. I don't know how many times I come across people and it's something that, like, if they had asked for it, I would have done it. But because
Mm-hmm.
they're demanding it, it's an automatic no. It's just something that happens in my system anymore. Like, I mean, I have a 6-year-old son. He is at that phase where he's like, Mom, do this for me. I'm just like, no. Can you ask? And with a confident voice, and he'll be like, Mom, can you do this thing for me? Cool, yeah, let's get it done. Like
Yeah.
there I just did a post recently about consent, and I to me consent is one of the sexiest things in the world. And not only for like the person receiving the yes when they get that or the but like for the person being asked, right? To me it's this person showing you that they like want to invite you into an experience
Mm-hmm.
to have with them. And
Yeah.
then you get your yes or your no in
Mm-hmm.
that, right? But how much more fulfilling and more satisfying is it to like know that that person wants to join you for an experience? Like, and I got that concept from it was a TED talk a long time ago, and the guy gave the example of, let's say you're at a party and like you've met a girl. This is a guy telling the story, obviously, um, and like you're chatting with her all night, and you go out on the balcony and you lean in for a kiss, and she pulls away.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, that feels real fucking shitty.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then he's like, okay, now imagine you went through the same thing, but rather than leaning in for a kiss, you asked her if you could kiss her. And she said no. But it doesn't feel as impactful. You actually didn't invest as much energy
Mm-hmm.
in asking the question as you did in actually taking the movement of leaning in for the kiss. Like there's that way of thinking about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that person's no, like it's not as impactful. Like you didn't actually cross their personal boundary, their bubble
Yeah.
to kiss them either. In that, if that person says yes, how much better is that to know that they wanted that space with you and that like they're totally down to like get all the saliva and juices and like sensations going on in the lips and mouth and all those lovely feelings. But it's like at that point of like hearing that TED talk, I remember just being like, oh, why doesn't everybody ask for everything they want? I was still obviously terrible at asking for what I wanted, but it was that spark of inspiration
Mm-hmm.
for how I could start moving a different direction in my life.
Yeah. I do want to. So Al has asked about talking more about rejecting the green flags.
Yes.
Um, do you have anything you want to say on that before I speak on it?
Um, I don't feel like I have anything more that wasn't said before, and just to clarify for the person asking the question, like these do get posted as replays on the YouTube channel
Mm-hmm.
at the or it's the sexy or at Sexient Beings on YouTube. Um, Also here in Clubhouse, you can listen to the replays within a couple minutes of the call actually ending
Mm-hmm.
as well. But if you had more you wanted to add on green flags, then by all means have at it, my dear.
Sure. I was just gonna give a scenario. of what could be or what rejecting a green flag could look like. So what came up for me when I first started in my current relationship was actually around sex. The green flags that came for me were his intimacy, were, taking care of me, taking me out to dinner, cuddling me while watching movies, and then just falling asleep, holding each other. Those are all beautiful and wonderful things and green flags. My reaction and rejection to it, which I created and catastrophized and created an issue with, was, well, why aren't you having sex with me? Because my past trauma with intimacy was, if they're not, basically sticking it in, they don't have, there's no intimacy between us. And he's going to leave me. Because in my past, my red flags were, once sex started to dwindle, so did the relationship, and then they ended up leaving me, and they'd always blame it on, oh, we don't ever have sex anymore. I don't even want to, the intimacies, things. So healthy intimacies outside of actual intercourse were green flags that I was rejecting. Like, I couldn't fathom the idea of not having sex with him every single day. And it took me time and conversation with other mentors that I work with to help me through this, to realize that I didn't understand what healthy intimacy in all of its ranges looked like. And so all of these green flags that were coming up for me, I was rejecting because I believed there was only one way to show intimacy and love to a person that you're in a relationship with, and that was sex.
So I do think it's interesting you're bringing this up because it's been a theory that's kind of been percolating, and I've been actually writing a bit on for my FetLife accounts. But I've been really wondering lately because there's been studies released that men are lonelier than ever, right? And there has been this like bigger uprise of women in the population who like are just like, nope, I'm like done sleeping with men. Like, fuck this. I'm done with toxic relationships and abuse. And they're going on their own self journeys, which is great, and all more the power to them. I love their energy. But I realized I was like, okay, well, like what may be coming up there that sex specifically feels like more of a need for men than it does for women. And I realized I was like, okay, well, I mean, sex is a hugely vulnerable space for both people. I mean, most of the time you're completely naked. Um, a lot of the time, at least in missionary position, like you're face to face, right? Even if you're not eyes opened, if your eyes opened, it's even more vulnerable. All great stages to play with in sexual exploration as well. The different ways you notice intimacy and feel connected with a person. But what I realized, I was like, oh, well, men get all these messages about like it's not safe to be emotional. Like men don't cry, right? Like don't be with your emotions. You need to be stoic. And men on average tend to be less good. They're not as great at creating community for themselves. And so this I was like, oh, like some of the most intimate conversations and emotional connections I've had with men have actually been like laying in bed after having sex. It's where they'll actually like open up and talk on deeper levels. I was like, oh, men are really only have like been conditioned to only really experience deeper levels of connection and intimacy when it's directly connected to sex.
Mhm.
So no wonder if the sex is being removed, they think that's the thing that they're receiving intimacy from. It's one form of intimacy,
Mhm.
right? But most of the intimacy they're receiving, even from nurturing, loving care, is probably also very closely connected to that time frame of them having sex.
Mhm.
So there it's not just like, oh, physical intimacy is removed, it's now emotional, mental, like it's
Mhm.
a bigger cup because it's all kind of been pooled into one and associated as this is the only space I can get it filled.
Yeah.
And so that's to me, it can apply to women as well.
Yes.
Women get more of a pass on like, oh, women are just emotional. Like girls get more of a pass with being in connection with their emotions. And women, even evolutionarily, are better at creating community. They're better at having female friends that they will reach out to. They can ask these female friends for a hug or to hold them, and that's not seen as weird.
Mhm.
I personally believe that it would be advantageous for the male populations to start creating those spaces for themselves.
Yes. And, for women who are like me, um, before I speak on that, I want to point out that, where my brain was coming from was a place of trauma. And, there's the fight, flight, fawn, freeze survival mode, whichever one you choose to go into, it's a survival mode. And survival mode
Mhm.
is a very masculine place, which is where I lived for the majority of my life, is a very masculine survival mode place. And so and that's a very masculine energied place. And so when I started to explore my femininity, and I will tell everybody that Alix was one of the first people to help me do that.
Yes.
And it was amazing. She's just like, okay, we need to open up your vagina and let the woman fly.
Let the
um,
untamed feminine out into the
exactly.
world.
I had no idea certain things existed within my reach just for my own personal being in who I was. Um, when letting go of that survival mode. And that survival mode is when green flags will come up and we'll still reject them because we just reject flags of any color because we are in survival and we have been taught, right, so far the flags that we've been introduced to in our lives, they're bad, they're landmines, so we need to avoid flags. And I love that I have been able to explore the reality that there are a rainbow plethora of flags out there of different colors that have different meanings, and not all of them are bad. And, as someone who basically spent her whole life walking around red flags and landmines, basically feeling colorblind and just avoiding all flags, it's almost like I had like this childlike curiosity to play with the first green flag that I discovered, and I poked it and I was like, "Oh my god, it didn't blow up." But I still ran away thinking it would. And then I turned around and was like, "Wait, there's no explosion? Well, let me go look at that again. Maybe I didn't press it right." And I spent a lot of time trying to get the green flag to blow up when I first discovered it. And then at some point, I think I just kind of like sat down in front of that green flag and was like, okay, clearly you're not going to blow up. So you're different from all the other flags that I've seen in my life. So who are you and what do you want? And I had to have like a good conversation with all of my green flags and be like, wait, so you're nice? You don't want to hurt me?
Yeah.
And that was in a sense my mind blew up because my mind was blown and I was just like, what? This is
You just
real?
got blown in a completely different way, and it's okay.
Exactly. Exactly. And since then, I have discovered all the different colors of flags that exist in the world, and I am so excited to continue because I don't feel like I've explored them all yet. Um, but it is scary to come upon a flag, and all you've ever experienced in your life is you walk over to it and you blow up. So rejecting green flags in the beginning is everyone's going to do it. There's just no going around it. We're gonna find ourselves confused because this is ignorance.
Well, and there can be certain. Oh, sorry, I just got two different things. There can be certain green flags that like you will have worked through,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Through your own like self-love journey, building
Yeah.
trust within yourself. And so like when it comes up, like maybe that's something you actually recognize as a green flag for you now.
Mhm.
But then maybe there's a green flag of another like color tone that you don't quite recognize yet as being
Mhm.
something that's safe. Um, the image I just got though, which was my second piece, was if you think about the very primal system, and it got sparked because of you talking about like you poked the flag but you still ran away.
Mhm.
Like if you look at young children exploring the world,
Mhm.
which the world on its own is very unknown to them, right?
Mhm.
Most of the time, there's a little bit of a tentativeness, right? They'll walk let's say 10 feet away from their mom, right? That's been their
Yeah.
normal bubble of safety away from their mom.
Mhm.
Well, now they decide they're going to walk 15 feet, but at 15 feet, they stop and they look back behind them to make sure their mom's paying attention,
Mhm.
right? Or
Yes.
they go over and they find a new bush and they like kind of like poke at it and they test it a little bit. And then
Mhm.
they're like, oh, what's this thing gonna do? Oh, like it just shifted. It's okay. Like, I'm gonna poke it some more. I mean, you obviously get the kids who like will just go run full on head first into the bushes and then get covered in blackberry brambles as well.
And that
But
was me.
but it's normal when things feel unknown that they feel uncomfortable and that there's a level of feeling scared about them.
Yes, understandably too. And there's no shame in it because you don't know it.
Well, and especially having been in toxic relationships, there's a part of your nervous
Yes.
system, and I'm going to say toxic relationships for the realm we're talking about right now is partnered relationships or
Mhm.
sexual partners.
Yeah.
And especially if the trauma happened there, it's going to create more of this like tentativeness. And it's okay to go slow. Like
Yes.
even if in the past, let's say you had a dating phase in your 20s where you're like, I sleep with people on the first date or I sleep with people on the third date. Like if now you're like, no, I need to slow down a little bit. I want to build more trust, more connection, more caring
Mhm.
with this person before I go hop in bed with them,
Yes.
then do that. Also,
Yeah.
if you want to just go hop in bed with somebody, like
Go for it.
do that, but know that it's your yes.
Yeah.
And if that person isn't willing to wait for you, then that wasn't your person. Fuck them. Like
Yeah.
move on. They're a loss
Mhm.
because you have all your own amazing gifts and qualities. Again, there's going to be somebody who like you are their perfect flavor. There's probably
Yes.
many somebodies who you are their perfect flavor and they want to get down and dirty with you and explore all the universe that is you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And for me, I wanted to get down and dirty with myself, and I just cut out dating for 3 whole years.
Mhm.
And when I finally felt like I was not going to be the toxic person in the relationship, like bringing up my shit from my past, which, as valid as it is, it should not be pushed onto other people. Only then did I feel comfortable actually allowing myself to say yes to go to dinner with somebody. And as much as I felt that I had overcome so much and I didn't think that I would bleed out, I still did a little bit. I caught myself. But as much as I want to say, like, you could stop dating for years and, it'll never come up again when you start dating again, unfortunately, that's just not the reality. You're going to be constantly working on and with yourself for the rest of your life
Mhm.
with everything that you have gone through in your life. And it just helps to view it like a little kid who's going over to poke the bush. Just, know that mom's right behind you. So when you poke it, I was, when you were saying that example, I was imagining myself as a kid where I would run over and I'd do something and then I'd look and make sure that my mom was there. And if it did something weird, I'd look at my mom and be like, "Whoa, did you see that?"
Mhm.
And she was always there. And we are our own, our inner selves are that mom figure now. So our inner child gets to go and roam around, but we have an inner parental figure as adults. We've gotten to that evolution in our psyches and who we've created ourselves to become. And if you're confident in that maternal figure that you have built for yourself, I implore you to allow your child to just go run out, explore a little bit, because you've got your back.
Yeah, and for me, I would say if we break it down to like, we all have a masculine and feminine side, right?
Hmm.
We all have our inner protectors as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
When we've been living in states of not being in alignment or dysregulation, those protectors can come up as that like more survival mode trauma response of the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Hmm.
Um, and I would say with men, it's a lot more acceptable that fight comes up in particular. That
Hmm.
is where it's more socially acceptable for men to be like aggressive, right? And that's that
Hmm.
very like forward action taking, um, like I'm gonna punch something, I'm gonna kick something, I'm gonna fight
Hmm.
it.
Yes.
But when like that
Or
protector part
avoiding.
of us can be seen as more of that paternal side.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that the action it's taking is the appropriate action for you actually building and maintaining thriving relationships. It's just doing the best job it can do.
In the
I would
moment.
say,
Hmm.
yeah, that the maternal side is the way we provide care and nurture
Hmm.
for ourselves. So finding that balance of, okay, how do I show myself love? And the boundaries are the
Hmm.
protector,
Hmm.
right? But when you start bringing little bits of both those sides in, right? And start showing yourself that more and more, you build trust in your system. You're not leaving it up to this person outside of you having to be the person who protects you.
Yes.
And that can be a hard thing to do. Like it has been a interesting journey to say the least, and there's been lots of things I've discovered and gotten to explore, there is not a single bit of that tremulous torrent that I have gotten to work through that I am not immensely grateful for at this
Mm-hmm.
point. So I can say, like, the treasure at the end of those things, if there really is an end, is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
When you can start actually bringing levels of consciousness to the spaces of your relationship, the connection with yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I know you usually need to hop off around too. Do you have anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think that was a beautiful ending. If you've got anything else you'd like to add, though, go for it.
Um, for my side, it's really, I just want to mention that I have, because we did talk a little bit more about men's connection and especially around being able to receive spaces of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a program called the Sovereign Dom program. You can find the link to that under my resources on the About page on YouTube, um, or under my other social media profiles. There's a link tree, and that'll take you to my website and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a 4-month long container where it is very encompassing on helping connect men with their authentic confidence and stepping into their ability to be a leader, to connect more deeply with their partners and within themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that they can actually attract and create these deeper connections they're wanting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then as far as women, I also have a conscious as fuck dating program. And once again, it's one-on-one coaching right now, but it is a phenomenal container that really helps women step into their self-love and find more balance with what they're desiring, being able to step into dating from a place of deep pleasure
Mm-hmm.
and like step out of that self-abandonment, deep, 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 deep dive self-love, so
Yeah.
much of it, and bring that forward to like have that playful, energetic aspect with dating. Because I know I've been there.
Oh, yeah.
Dating can go into lots of realms of burnout and have lots of fears come up.
Oh, yeah.
But the more we see that we can support our own systems, it's really, really
Mm-hmm.
powerful moving forward.
Yes. I'll also mention I have a program that's, well, the first part of the program is positioned more to help you heal from your past toxic relationships or, traumas that you've experienced in your past, to help you feel confident and prepared to enter back into the dating world. And then I have a back end program for women who have done that work with me in how to navigate the new dating world
Mm-hmm.
with all of that boundaries, the no's, everything we went over today involved in that. So it's different than what Alix does, and I don't work with men like Alix does. Uh, but mine is more towards inner healing on a personal level, finding self love, and then entering into the dating pool again or the dating world.
Yeah, and I can say I had one client and I thought it was like everybody gets their own variations of results, right? Actually, when Rachelrose and I first met, she was going to be a practice client for me going through my conscious dating program that I was doing for my certification. Um, but we went a different route, and that was perfect and absolutely beautiful.
Oh, I love
Uh,
it. It
but
was
there
brilliant.
was there's been another client, and I loved it because she had gone through so many toxic relationships, and I want to say it was only a month in to our work together where she started dating a new potential partner. Like she was trying to not put expectations on it and stuff and just have fun with it. And this has been a few years now. I believe that they're still together. And as far as the little bits of information I've gotten, it has been the most fulfilling relationship she has ever had. And that was
Oh,
very
it's
shortly
so
into that container, right?
beautiful.
Um,
Yeah.
so you can have amazing things sparked just by even taking that step forward for yourself, right?
Yes.
And so, like, that's reaching out for support as well can be really valuable because so many of those traumas are created in spaces of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the really beautiful gifts that working with a coach does offer is learning to even create safety in a relationship that you can show up as any expression of yourself. You can show up crying, you can show up stubborn, you can show up right,
Mm-hmm.
like happy and joyful or goofy or whatever it is. And this person is going to like accept you,
Yeah.
be curious to find understanding for what you have going on, and potentially even like find love for what you have going on. I can personally say every single client I have worked with, I deeply love on some level, right? That
Of
doesn't
course.
mean that they
Yeah.
will ever be a sexual play partner for me because that's just a limit I set in my coaching, but I deeply love them and wish them all the best in the world and life,
Yeah.
right? But it also gives them a model where some people don't ever have that model
Mm.
of,
Yeah.
oh, these are the ways I can start bringing that to myself. Because the number one way we all start learning in life is off of modeling and
Mm-hmm.
what's displayed around us.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I like to view life as it's first a mindset, and then it's a skill set, and then it's action and
Mhm.
mastery.
I do want to say, as one last little bit, I know I said I didn't have anything else. I keep talking. It happens. It happens. Alix is verbose at times. Um, One of the bigger lessons I had to take away after my catastrophic relationship of my marriage was I would give people trust just based off of their word. Even when trust was broken, even when they had blatantly lied or stolen or cheated, they would tell me they were going to do different and I just believed them, right? Which ultimately like there's there's issues there. There's issues and there's non-issues.
Mhm.
But I would just continue to give them trust. But they didn't back it up with action. And so one of my big cornerstone pieces for myself at this point is I will listen to all the beautiful words somebody wants to tell me about what they want to create, where they want to go in life,
Mhm.
how they want to work on a relationship. If they do not take the action to follow that up, then that's my thing of like, maybe I need to take a little bit of a step back.
Mhm.
I give myself and them the space of curiosity to be like, okay, like obviously you couldn't follow through in whatever the timeline was, or maybe they never set a timeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if they're like consistently not meeting a timeline they set and aren't willing to look at that, maybe it's something to take a look at and take a step back. Because that's not on you.
Yeah.
If they're saying, I'm going to wash the dishes today,
And then not doing it. Yeah.
and they're not doing it, and then that's a month later, and they still haven't touched the original dishes,
Mhm.
Like, okay, like how many dishes do you really want piled up in your sink and rotting food and other things? Like, lived in a house like that and it was not fun.
Yeah, same, same. And
So
I
it's action, action.
yeah,
Help
and
validate.
yes, and also within yourself.
Yes.
Are you being accountable to yourself? Did you say you wanted to lose 30 pounds last year, and did you take the actionable steps to do it? Did you say you wanted to get help for your trauma? Did you actually take the actionable steps to make that happen?
Hmm.
Did
Yeah.
you, if
And
you want to start dating, did you did you go out into finding new hobbies or dating sites? Did you take the actionable steps and
mhm.
holding yourself accountable for those as well?
Yeah, and maybe that like end result looks slightly different. Like Rachel
Oh, for
Rose just
everybody.
gave the
Yeah,
example
of
of
course.
like, oh, you wanted to lose 30 pounds. Well, you didn't consider that now you're lifting weights, and while you lost 45 pounds of fat, you gained 30 pounds of muscle,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Like
exactly,
there's things
exactly.
like that. But like, are you taking the action for yourself? And if
Mhm.
the action you're setting is too big, what's the smaller action? What's the
One step at a time. Yeah,
littler step that you can take towards what you're desiring?
exactly. Well, I'm gonna end it there because I know we're gonna
Yes.
end up going on a tangent and talking
Oh, we're good at that. It's okay.
forever.
I miss you and I love you.
I as well. I hope to see you
uh,
soon.
yes. And so next week we will be back. The conversation next week is breaking mirrors, and I am so excited because mirrors have been coming up
Mhm.
so much in symbology in my life lately, and I love the topic. To me, it's a lot about um, the way we can project on the world, or the things we're noticing in the world around us being that representation of the shadow and the things we like or don't like, right? That is drawing our focus from the subconscious. So I look
Mhm.
forward to talking with you then, Rachelrose, and to creating that beautiful space for sharing
Yeah.
with the world.
Yes, I'm so excited. Ah, well, thank you for sharing this space with me today, and I look forward to sharing it with you next week.
Yes, have a great one. Goodbye.
Bye.